Welcome back to the Aviator Edge podcast. Today we have Ricky Gutierrez with us. We're psyched. We just went on a flight. Ricky's a stock trader, and he's live every morning at 6:30 a.m. and with daylight savings sometimes 7:30. But we just did a flight with Ricky, and Ricky also was, at the age of 23, the youngest millionaire in Arizona. All right? Can I say that?
I used it for a YouTube title. Okay. I think I was 22. But it was just more of a catchy title. I don't know statistically speaking if I was, but
we'll count it. I'm counting it in my mind.
Did he just cut you a year?
He added a year.
My apologies.
That's what I mean.
How dare you?
This is a trader.
1
to 2% makes a huge difference, bro. Let's tighten up our game here.
That's too good. But no, yeah, we got started at an early age, and we have a good group around us, and it made it, I want to say, a little bit easier and a little bit more enjoyable to, experience the success we did.
Yeah.
So.
And was that all from stock trading?
Nope. It was a combination of, early on, my first video on YouTube was buying my first property in Gilbert, Arizona.
Cool.
A part of that, within like the first 2 years of me living here, I ended up buying 2 properties. And then within 4 years, I ended up having 5 properties.
Wow.
So a lot of that, even back then, I was told not to buy real estate because market was going to crash, because it supposedly happens every 7 to 8 years, right? It was 2015. I was scared. I was about to buy a house for $167,000, but then I did from FHA to conventional. Now my loan amount was, I think, like 171, but I was told, no, like, just be careful, market could crash.
Yeah.
And I was 20 years old at the time, so I was like, how am I going to commit to something for the next 30 years? It was just such a daunting experience. But now looking back, I should have bought all of Gilbert. Yeah, it would have.
Oh, it's crazy thinking of a house for $170,000.
Now thinking about that, it was like built in 2005. It was a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath. Now the house is worth over $500,000. Yeah, and we have it as a short-term rental now. So
wow.
There's a great line I saw about that said, when we purchase things, that's always too high at the moment.
Yeah.
So if you're buying a house, it's always, it's so much at the moment.
Definitely.
But if you wait a year down the road, it's going to grow. Houses do that typically. Every 7
traditionally, yeah.
But I thought that was very interesting. So I'm looking at some of the stuff, and as a stock trader, I'm probably not going to be rich anytime soon. But I think it's because I tend to get nervous and I want to trade so fast. And I want to feel like I'm doing something. But you kind of talk about, let's slow down and breathe. Let's let the market breathe a little each day and know what's going on. I think it's a pretty impressive way to do it. And maybe that's the secret to you making it and, well, me not.
Yeah, no, I think a big part of it is understanding market cycles. And people ask the question of how long does it take to like truly understand how to succeed in the stock market. I think it takes at least 2 to 2.5 years. The reason why is every 2 to 2.5 years, you kind of experience a bull and bear market cycle, where like in 2002 to 2003, markets were extremely bearish. 2003 to now, markets were extremely bullish, where if you would have started investing or trading back in 2022 when you were trying to make money by going long, meaning buying to sell for a profit, it would have been nearly, not impossible, but very challenging, because markets were on a consistent downturn during 2022 to 2023. Okay. But then in 2023 to now, you could have invested in anything and you would have felt like invincible, because Nvidia, all of big tech, is now at all-time highs, and market direction and market cycle was in your favor. So I think a big part of what we do now is just making traders aware of what has worked for us, what hasn't. And when it comes down to day trading, I do believe one thing that we talked about before jumping on this was giving the market the time that it needs to paint its picture for the day. Where right at market open, there could be a lot of volatility. It could look bullish, it could look bearish, but then giving the market 30 minutes to an hour to kind of paint more of a, okay, are we actually bullish today? Are we actually bearish today? Or is market consolidating and I don't want to take a trade today? You kind of give yourself not just a little bit of time to breathe, but also just more of a better sense of direction for that given day.
And when I watch that on Instagram and I watch you do your thing there, and where can I find you on Instagram?
It's Ricky Gutierrez with 2 Z's.
Okay.
Yep.
So when I see that, it helps me calm down just a little bit.
Yeah.
If you can do it and relax a little bit, day trading tends to be this energetic, almost a high, if you will.
Definitely.
There's kind of this fun in the process, and you get attached to that. And sometimes you don't think that if you just breathe for a minute and follow his strategy, it's going to make you money.
It could be impulsive. It's like gambling, right?
Yeah.
It truly can be. And I think that's the biggest thing, where if you are just taking trades right at market open, shooting for anything and hoping that it goes according to plan without a plan, then at that point it does, I would say, fall more along the lines of, just gambling and hoping to get lucky. But when it comes down to, like, as of right now, as we're speaking, there's about to be a CPI data report. It's an inflation report that is released on a monthly basis.
Okay.
Inflation has been a big focus for the Federal Reserve because inflation was at a 40-year high at 9.1%. Now we've gotten it down to 3%. The current expectation is 3.1% for today. Depending if the report comes out higher or lower will determine if markets go up or down. If you had no experience or no understanding that that report was about to be released, in the next few minutes you would have been very surprised, because you'll see a huge gap up or a huge gap down. So again, understanding or taking time to understand these different economic reports or series of events that happen on a monthly and yearly basis just become very essential for a trader to succeed long term.
You and I were talking about this yesterday, that Starbucks thing going on. I mean, the 24, the switch from
Yeah.
Chipotle. You know more about it than I do. But I was thinking, my money apparently is in the wrong, but I need to start rolling some out, man. I'll take a venti on that. Throw me a little bit.
I know. Yeah, well, you did a video on it, too, about that. So the CEO switched
Correct.
from Chipotle to Starbucks.
Brian Nickel.
Okay, and Starbucks went up 24.5%.
Correct.
Wow.
See, but I wouldn't expect that, because Chipotle's been getting reamed by their size portions and everything, especially the past year.
By the public, but Chipotle sales year over year are up 11%. Starbucks sales are down 2% year over year. So when it comes down to Brian Nickel, he's mainly known for two things, and it's increasing prices and increasing sales. So by having that expectation, I mean, Starbucks previously just changed their CEO about 1 year ago, and they have not been performing well. So they hope that Brian Nickel, on the track record that he has, he was formerly the CEO of Taco Bell. So he has a very successful track record where he comes in during very significant or critical times for the company and tends to turn it around. I think since he took over in Chipotle, CMG stock, which is their ticker symbol, is up 800%. So he came during 2018 during the E. coli outbreak with all the lettuce or whatever it is that they had going on, and he's completely turned it around. So I dug a little bit deeper, and I not only like to pay attention to it on the investing side, which I think is great for just the general public, but I think even on the trading side, when I see something that jumps up 24.5%, this would not be for a beginner, but for someone like myself, I ask myself, is that an overreaction? Right. Is that something that when, 1 week from now, it's going to correct itself? Kind of like you were just talking about Dutch Bros. When Dutch Bros originally IPO'd, just like many IPOs, there's a lot of hype. It's kind of like a grand opening, right? Yeah. It gets factored in. It is an overreaction, and then normally it tends to correct itself 1 to 2 weeks after. I think there's a statistic out there where when an IPO launches, on average within the first day it has a 9% or 16% increase. I forgot what it was. By the time that you check back on that same stock 30 days later, it's like down 6%. So it just shows how much of a catalyst those specific events can be. So anytime I see something gap up or gap down significantly, I just begin to pay attention to it. Not that it has to correct itself, but that it can. And as a day trader, there's money to be made there. Right. CrowdStrike was another one about 2 weeks ago. Everyone, when it came down to flights, right, because of that software, it was a security issue. There's a software debug. Microsoft is one of the companies that uses them. There's over 1 million devices. It was single-handedly, I think, one of the biggest IT issues ever recorded, right? And it caused the stock price to sell off 20%. But was that it? No. I mean, the days after, it sold off even more. Right. But that's something where, as an investor, if it's not going to be the end for CrowdStrike, then at that point I just begin to pay attention to it to see if it begins to find its support, begins to find its bottom, is what we like to call it. And then when it begins to indicate signs of a recovery, then at that point I can choose to decide, do I want to enter? And I can either enter for a swing trade, or if I want to invest in CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike was performing very well before this unfortunate scenario.
So based on your knowledge of the CEO, you don't think that the Starbucks increase of 24% is an overreaction?
I do.
Yeah, you do.
No, I think any reaction of 20, even like right now, yeah,
it's
like
absurd.
what time is it? Right now it's 5:40. So CPI data report came out 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
I think that even if the markets gap up, there's a very common saying that it's like any reaction tends to be an overreaction in the market. Anything that pushes up 24% within one day, it's just like there is some hype that is factored in. It doesn't mean that it has to correct itself the next day, but it's not an if it will correct itself, it's a when. The same thing happened with like AI. NVIDIA is one of the most valuable companies that's publicly traded, is one of the best performing big tech companies for 2024, and it's had an amazing 2024. But with that being said, it gapped up so much within such a short period of time that it also, although being one of the most valuable companies that's publicly traded, it surpassed Apple at one point with over a $3 trillion market cap.
Wow.
It also saw a 30% drop in the past 3 to 4 weeks. That is very significant, right? So it's not an if it's an overreaction. It's anytime something becomes very overvalued within a short period of time, it is my job as a trader to identify those opportunities because I can make money on the short term, right? By being able to short those stocks, which means I bet against them and make money as they sell off. Not that I would recommend that for a beginner, but it's just a way that you can make money. Yeah.
So I think maybe your 24% logic may make some sense, but let's not forget that CEO also brought back the Mexican pizza to the Taco Bell menu, which is a big deal. That
Very
righted
true.
itself. See how things right themselves? That's exactly what you said.
I agree. Yeah.
It's so impressive to hear you talk about stock stuff. You can tell you've done it for a long time. When did you start like live trading and stuff like that?
I started live trading back in 2017.
How old were you then?
I was 23.
Okay, cool.
Something like that. Yeah. I think I was 23.
Get a good early start at it. That's
Yeah.
impressive.
So where does if you don't mind me asking, where does a 23-year-old get that capital? I mean, are you an In-N-Out Employee of the Month? Where do you
Kind of.
get,
No,
you
I
see
was
what mean?
I was close. Yeah. At 18, I was very fortunate to get a sales-based job in California. So I was always really good at saving money. When people, I've jumped on a few different podcasts and they always try to ask like, what kind of crazy come up story do I have? I was like, I have the most boring come up story because I don't ever want to say that I was poor or anything like that. Like I always did a really good job from a very early age saving money due to what I saw at an early age. My dad in 2008 was a general contractor. He laid tile. In 2008, I saw my family and my parents as like the perfect picture of like what a Mexican American family looks like. And then all of a sudden 2008 happens, the financial crisis. And then I see my dad pretty much lose all the work that he had. He was an unlicensed general contractor. So then at that point, there was no work. I began to see their relationship begin to get affected in somewhat not on a positive light,
right,
where I just became very aware of our finances at a very early age. So at that point moving forward, I just didn't want to be a burden to my family because I saw and what it looked like of how much of a need they were. So at that point, I started buying and selling stuff online. I started trying to look up different ways on how to make money. And at age 18, then I got my first job that was my second job that was a sales-based job for T-Mobile at the time. I ended up working. I was super motivated. And it's one thing that I've said from my first videos, and I've said it even many times before then, is I think sales is a great way to be able to like at a very early age to not just gain sales experience, but I think when you get paid, not just on an hourly output, but based off of results that you actually, deliver, it's more motivating. Where at age 18, I was making, I would say over $60,000 a year. I lived at home and I saved every penny. At that point, I was also buying and selling cars. I was just getting into the stock market, and I would buy and resell. I was like an eBay super seller back at the time. This was before Amazon was very popular. Right. But I would buy and sell phones online, just anything that I could to even make more money. By the time that I was 20, I had like a year and a half work history. And I had to write a letter to the lender that I was, or the brokerage that I was going to get a loan from, of like, hey, you can't not let me get qualified. I don't know. It's what my lender told me to do so I can get qualified, even though I didn't have a full 2-year work history. It was like that I couldn't not be allowed because I literally wasn't able to be full-time because of when I graduated high school. And they approved me, and it was all based off of the money that I saved, which at that time I already had like over $60,000 or $70,000 by age 20. And
awesome.
Yeah. So what I'm getting from that, and I think maybe we could we can learn something out of this. The motivation is not the money. The motivation is coming from the heart, and that's the way you keep. Because some days ain't going to be great days. I'm sure you made some trades and you were like, "Well, this didn't go right," especially in the early. So
yeah.
You have to draw on something, and it can't be for the love of the dollar. It has to be for something else. So it sounds like that comes from the heart. You wanted to give yourself some stability and maybe help your family in the process, and you learn from that.
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, I'm not gonna lie, I think I was very money motivated. Right. Like when thinking about it, on why I would Google search the things that I was looking up of how to make money, as a 17-year-old, or how to buy and resell these things, or how to start trading in the market. It was because I was motivated by money. But then once I think I just like found something I was passionate about at a very early age, which some people don't need to be passionate about something they're uber successful in. Right. For me, once things began to click, it then at that point didn't become about the money. It was more about, I can't almost even pinpoint exactly like from like 20 to when I was 20 years old to 23. I was just working all of the time. I was enjoying what I was doing, but I almost couldn't pinpoint a moment where like, oh, this was a pivotal moment. It was just, we were working all the time, and that's all me and my friends did, and that's all we enjoyed. I didn't go out, I didn't party. And I really do think now looking back, that was a huge reason on why we did so well so early on, is because I was unaware of what a life could be. Because then at 23, I started going out with my friends, and I was like, oh, this is why people enjoy the weekends. I had no idea. Like, I never drank, I never went to clubs, nothing like that. And then by that time, I was already a millionaire, and we started going out. I was super nerdy, so it wasn't like, oh, like I'm here. But I went to my first club, and it was Whiskey Row Gilbert, and it was like in December of 2017. And I just recently broke up with a girlfriend that I had at the time, and my buddies were like, hey, come out. I had my cardigan, I had a full button up, and I had my ASU hat. I'm telling you, like, I put the N in nerdy.
Bro, you were a T Swift record, weren't
you?
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Showed up in your cardigan.
When I look back and my lady shows me what she looked like then and what I looked like then, I was like, there's a reason we weren't together. And I think it's good to, like, be self-aware when it comes down to those things where, like, people ask if it was because I was extremely disciplined or, I think I was at the right place at the right time and had the right people around me that were not a distraction. I didn't have any distractions in my life. It wasn't because I wanted to. It was almost because I was so naive of what was out there. And because of that, of being so unaware of what life could be, if I had a full-on social life and I went to ASU Tempe, I went to ASU Poly, right? And I went to the engineering campus, and instead of partying every weekend, I was
doing math. Yeah.
No, I was just
with an A.
By that time, I had my house. I had my 2 roommates, and all we would ever do is we were just always filming content about things we're buying and reselling, and that's just, we enjoyed the whole process of it. Yeah, that's all.
It's cool.
Yeah,
I love that you said self-aware, because I think awareness is so important. Just recognizing things, especially in our parents when you're growing up, because then it helps you motivate, to be responsible and stuff. And I think we're about the same age. I was 16 when my parents started to experience, the toughness of 2008 and stuff. And that was where we downsized in the house. And then, my dad had to sell his car. My parents sold all of their kind of things that they had invested in, gold and paintings and stuff. And nothing had any value at that time. And there is like this moment where if you're aware of it, you see it, then it can help you kind of propel forward, which is so cool to see how you were so aware of it that then you were like, I'm going to make sure that I'm financially well off, and you started chasing that. That's
definitely.
So cool.
I think like now, thinking about the future, we'll see kids in 2021, 2022 that were affected by the pandemic. Those were huge shifts that I haven't seen in my lifetime as an adult, where I think we'll see a new wave of of kids that were not only self-aware, but then were motivated because of what they saw and experienced. That I think that's like my coolest thing now looking back. I don't have a crazy success story. It was just like I experienced something and I just didn't want to be in that same position when I had my family. And that's been a big motivator for me from when I started.
Wow, that's that 2008 thing is interesting because you guys talk about, you remember your parents. I lost $20,000 on my first house because I had to pay someone to take it from me in Michigan, and all of my belongings they took with it. And I wrote that check for $20,000.
That's tough.
And I thought to myself, real estate cannot be the way, because in my whole life, all I heard was real estate was a good way to make money.
Yeah.
And then, but when I got past that, now I've made a lot of money in real estate since then. And so you can make money in real estate, but my first experience in the market was awful. Thank you to that downturn.
But I think by you being able to experience that, just like we saw a lot of traders or investors experience 2022. 2022 was a huge downturn for the market, where if you do experience that and you're able to tolerate the time that it takes for the market to recover, then at that point, I feel like you're very, your tolerance for what you're able to take on is now so much greater than someone that's just getting started, where now you experience something that really very few people now can even relate to, right? Where at that point, now everything seems so much easier, because having to write a $20,000 check back in 2008, 2009 has to be one of the toughest things. It might not sound like a super, super crazy amount, but like, especially when it's your first house, especially when it's your first investment, you're told your entire life, this is what you have to do. And then to see that everything everyone told you supposedly was a lie, but it's not that I think it was a lie, it's just bad timing, right? Bad timing when it comes down to market cycles. And I think that's why it's really important to understand the overall big picture, the macroeconomics of whatever it is that you are getting into.
Man, that's well said. You got to think about, I always tell, me and my accountant talk about this a lot. I need us to see around corners somehow. It's real hard to do. It's a guessing game, and people like you are better at it than people like me. But I feel like the real estate market, I see you dabbling in it. I see you on Instagram. I saw you put a check in the bank the other day for, I don't know, $753,000 or some change, something like that. And I thought to myself, I didn't realize you were buying and selling. Look, I like money too. I thought you were buying and selling homes the way that you're doing it, which I thought was an interesting business model.
Like I said, the only reason that I've been able to grow just our entire business the way that we have it now is because of the people. And again, I don't know if I just got lucky, but one of my partners, his name's Nick. He was a model in LA, had no real estate background. He came to visit during the pandemic. Modeling was not active back in 2019 because everything was shut down.
That's what happened to me. I was a model.
I can tell. But yeah, he moved in. I had a 6,000 square foot house, had 8 rooms at my house. All the guys that I was working with lived at that house and the other house that I had. He moved in. He came to sleep in our guest room for 2 weeks, ended up staying to this date. He ended up breaking up with his girlfriend, or his girlfriend broke up with him. But looking back, that's
another podcast.
Yeah, now he has, I think, 9 to 10 rental properties himself. We flip about 1 to 2 properties every single month, and we just focus on $300,000 to $400,000 homes, and we look for 10% cash on cash return. And we took advantage of really just timing, because we started during the pandemic. We had no expectation of, hey, markets are about to skyrocket. We were just like, we're bored. Even if we break even or lose a little bit of money, it will be a big lesson learned. I was already giving hard money loans out. So I was lending house flippers money at like a 10 to 15% interest rate. So they would keep my money for about 2 to 3 months. I would be the first beneficiary on the property, so the first lien holder. And if they default, then I take over the house at whatever it is that we agreed on. We had this mentor, his name is Lenny, and he was much more well-versed. He was the one that I was giving these hard money loans to. He pretty much showed us everything that we now know about flipping, where now Nick has built his entire portfolio and is now super well-versed in this market, where now there's no one, I won't do a real estate deal without him. I've done many projects that didn't need to include him. One of the biggest ones is one we did in Paradise Valley. It was presented to me through social media. It was like a $2.5 million purchase. We ended up selling it for $3.3 million, something like that. He had no business being in it, but I included him in the project and gave him a percent because first off, he's been with me from the beginning. And second, it's like having someone there, even if I have to pay a certain percent or a certain amount of money, I think it's really important to make sure that someone's looking out for my best interest when I have other people that are in there that are looking for, their side of the revenue. So having someone like that is a big reason on why I am, or the reason I am where I am today.
There's one thing that Oprah taught me in the process, in this whole process, is that you got to buy loyalty sometimes. You're going to have to pay for it. Everyone around you, if you want silence and you need that cone, you kind of got to pay for that. And it's okay.
Definitely.
It's okay. Everyone around you can profit. I mean, the rising tide, the ship, I mean, all the boats go up. So that's okay.
It's an exchange of value, right? And it's because of what he understands that I don't. I want him to, not just because he's my friend or because I feel like I funded the start of his career, so therefore he owes me something. I don't think anyone deserves anything. I think everything is earned, and if I feel like he is valued at a specific dollar amount and it's going to be in my best interest, overall big picture, then that's how I would like to move forward with our partnership, where it's not just I expect him to do it because he's my friend, but I would rather pay him because that's how much I value him as a friend.
Amen. I believe in that. I believe everyone around you, if everyone's not with you, eventually it doesn't go your way. So you're telling me Nick is your Stedman. Look at you. That's awesome, man. That's real cool.
Yeah.
So you have obviously so much experience in stocks and real estate and all that now. I'm sure in the market you're shorting stocks as well as investing in stocks. So you're probably making money whether the market's going up or down. Yeah?
We tried to.
Yeah. Do you feel pretty much invincible now that you've learned so much about it?
Heck
a
no.
lot of people say it's guessing, but it's more like educated guessing. Yeah?
I think, again, giving the market the time that it needs to paint its picture, right? And just like I would need it for if I'm doing a day trade to either go short or go long, there are moments, especially right now, with not just the economic events that are happening in economic reports, but with what just happened in the past month with the different presidents that are in the election, that are not, that are, these were not things that I could have ever expected or predicted, where those are specific events where that's when it really makes sense to be invested in the market long term, right? Where trading, you could make money on those impulsive moves, but they are very volatile and very quick. But man, there are many times where I work really well with the market, but even just like yesterday, I don't know if it was just because of my travel. I took an impulsive trade and I lost $2,000 within a few minutes of the market opening. And today we'll see. I know I can recover from that, but that's the thing, that anytime that I come from taking a loss, I like to remind myself that it's not just trying to make that money back, but reminding myself that every trade's like a singular individual trade. It has nothing to do with what I've done in the past before. So just because I lost money on NVIDIA yesterday doesn't mean that I have to make it on that. I know I could make money, and I think that's the thing that's really encouraging, is that when you do focus on direction, there is money to be made as long as you focus on direction and that direction is clear. You just have to make sure that you pay attention to it. There's a common phrase of learn to dance with the market and not step on its toes. So if market's bullish but you think it's going to downturn, well, don't just short it regardless if you think that it's overbought, because just like yesterday, the market went up the entire day and it was overbought from the beginning. And it just shows how powerful market direction is, where no indicator is going to tell you like it's not that deep. It's just like market sentiment is so important, where it's a very humbling experience to be trading in this market, especially as it continues to change. Because right as you feel that, oh man, I feel invincible or unstoppable, market changes on you very quickly, and it reminds you that you are not.
It'll humble you.
Yeah, for sure.
So thank you for spending time with us and scrolling through here. We appreciate you. We are spending time with Ricky Gutierrez with 2 Z's, as in don't sleep on your money. And we have Pilot John here. And while we're here and we're talking about that, I want to switch gears if I can.
Of course.
At what point did you up and decide I need to get in the aircraft business?
Yeah, so let me think. I was always interested or intrigued by aviation. Right. I come from a background where, again, my my Hispanic family is scared of flying. Just to put that into perspective, I loved flying. So I loved flying so much, I took the biggest risk of all, and I became a Spirit airline member. They had like this like budget airline pass that was like $60 or $70 a year, and I could fly for like $9 per flight. Supposedly, I only got one of those ever, but I've done it with Frontier. Frontier had the like yearly pass where as long as you book it within 24 hours, you can do that. So I've always loved traveling. I loved flying, but I never personally knew anyone that could fly themselves. So as I got a little bit closer to one day, what I thought, I was like, I'm going to buy a jet, and the first jet that I'm ever in is going to be my jet. So I never flown private, nothing like that. And then in 2022, when I bought my first jet, it was a Citation 501. It was a cheap old one. But yeah, that was the first time that I've ever been in one. And that's when I kind of got more motivated to start learning more about aviation. And I was so naive, just so you guys all know, I was so naive about aviation. I thought that within a year to 2 years, I was going to be able to start flying my own jet.
Yeah.
So
now wait a minute, I could have accelerated your program. When you talk about Venture West, that's another conversation.
Very true.
We can get you there.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the thing. I thought I could do it part-time. I thought that I could do it at my 1 to 2 hours. I don't know. I literally had no understanding of it. Yeah. Now, especially as I've come here to Venture West, and I see everything it is that you guys are doing here, this is like people's full-time commitment. And it's like you guys get them from knowing nothing, just like I was, to getting ready to become a commercial pilot, right? And I think that is the great thing, where this is a one-stop shop as long as you're willing to dedicate the time, right? For me, I was the cliche. I had the money. I thought that I could just buy it and learn. And I became aware of how serious aviation is, how serious it needs to be taken. And yeah, I still really do enjoy it, and I still want to work towards becoming a pilot, just maybe not for my jet.
Well, okay, so when we get you there, which we will, I have no doubt, how are you going to be able to put that into your business model? What's your plan there? I mean, is that better than your $9 Frontier deal? I'm asking. Just asking for a free.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of it would just be more of being able to do things with my family, and especially in creating content. Creating content is part of my business. Obviously, there's a big incentive in write-offs when it comes down to aviation. And I just think if I could create content, and also we love traveling, especially relatively close to neighboring states, I think having a prop plane like a Cirrus would be something that would be very realistic for me and my family, that I can choose to take on, become licensed, and then be able to travel with them as we please.
We can. It's much easier to get there than you talked about the jet.
Yes.
There's so much more going on with the jet. Now, this gentleman flies jets on a regular basis.
Yes.
And he can tell you there's a lot more to that than when I jump into the Piper Arrow.
Yes.
Big difference.
Well, yeah, especially Citation like 501, some of those single pilot jets. Those a lot of insurance companies, you just run into so many issues there. Where they'll let you be single pilot if you have 1,000 hours in that jet. Or single pilot owners. I mean, sometimes they'll be willing to do it, but they'll give you a massive. I mean, it's a massive insurance.
I learned about
cost.
all of that, about the insurance, how many hours you need, and I saw with my schedule and how long it took me to gain like 13 hours, and I was like, oh man, I was so wrong. But I think it's a really humbling experience where, it made me appreciate pilots more because of the seriousness and the commitment that should be required to become a pilot. The whole checklist, and I think, like, now looking back, we've had pilots sign up for our program, and I've always wondered, I was like, I don't know like why they would ever want to, but like with all of your guys' checklists, how disciplined pilots are, how structured they are, at least from what I've seen, and using Venture West as an example, I could see how they can resonate very well with the market and how it should be handled, and creating checklists and being very disciplined and sticking to your criteria. And if conditions are not met, then you don't choose to move forward, where if only everyone was like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is definitely a little more comforting that the pilots that are flying 300 passengers behind, that they're going through some rigorous training at least to be able to,
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's that training and all of those requirements are the reason that we are able to avoid so many. We don't bounce a lot of planes off the ground, thank the good Lord, and that training is super important to us.
Definitely. And when you look at the statistics of, people are often scared of flying, but when you look at on the commercial side especially how many accidents there are overall long term over the years, it's very rare, right? Extremely rare, where even recently with all the things that have been happening with Boeing, as more of that has come to light, my family or my girl asked me, are we concerned about flying? And it's like, well, no, it's still such a minute issue in the grand scheme of things, right? Where talking about turbulence and learning more about that for an individual, it feels really scary in the back. But then I'm on the pilot side of TikTok, and they make videos about how funny it might be. Like, they might just see their coffee move, and they're like, not even fazed by it.
Right.
But I feel like the common or average person just has no understanding of that, because flying and aviation is such like an obscure thing for, I would say, the average American. At least it was for me, where as I began to learn more about it, not only did I begin to appreciate it more, but it encouraged me to want to learn more as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, the average person just sees the plane flying and thinks it's magic, So when there's turbulence, it's like, this thing's not just going to suddenly fall. Like the magic's going to stop.
What's an up and down business? Much like the situation that you're in. It's funny how the two things tie together.
Think like when really trying to understand that statistic, I think it's great for people to be aware of the why when an individual pilot, if it's like a dentist or a lawyer or a doctor, is like the common cliche, like they think that, oh, they're too good and they don't need to do all these checklists type of approach when it comes down to taking off and all these accidents that could have been avoided if they would have just taken it seriously and there was no ego involved. Where for me, it might be a little daunting, but I think as you learn from their mistakes, it just emphasizes how crucial it is to make sure you do your pre-flight checklist, that you don't skip any steps, because it's not just your life, but maybe the passengers or the people below you that you are also putting at risk. And I think that's a very selfish thing. So I think the more that I learn about it, although again, statistically speaking, it is a scary thing, it just encourages me to avoid those mistakes that were made, that often are very avoidable.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. You're 501. You had you ran into some airworthiness issues. Am I wrong on that? Did I read that, or that plane sort of some FAA stuff? Did you have to get it looked at, or did I miss something?
Yeah. So it was. I was wondering. I was like, why does 501 sound familiar? I'm that unaware of the plane that I have. Yeah, the Citation 501. When we got it, the people that I bought it with. So I put up all the money. And one of the partners found the deal. That was like their equity. Then the other partner flew the plane. They have a social media following, and I guess a lot of people were targeting them. There was a point where something happened that they got reported, and then it lost its airworthiness. We had to get it back, and that was a whole hassle within itself. So I'm not too invested in that. I don't handle any of that. Anytime that we received any letters, I just sent it to them, because as you can tell, I'm very unaware of how to handle anything FAA related.
Yeah, listen, I am too. and I do it every day. The FAA's a big onion with a lot of peel on it, so you work your way through that.
I was really surprised with, maybe it's just me, but how old-fashioned a lot of the submission process for working with them is, especially with everything we have going on now, and how, in my opinion, just like grandfathered they still are. Where it doesn't seem very, maybe it's for a reason, because they like slowing things down and they want it to be a process, but it just didn't seem very efficient by any means.
Oh yeah, no, I just requested aircraft records on a plane, and they sent it to me on a CD disc, and it took it took them like 15 days to send it to me. I was like,
and the carrier pigeon was worn out when it finally dropped.
And for someone to be so strict, so old-fashioned, but yet so delayed when it comes down to technology, I was just like, kind of caught off guard by that whole process. But again, you learn now. I think we paid $35 to register our jet because it was that old. Something like that.
Well, that's almost the same for everything. Really, you're going to find some of the most advanced systems on smaller planes because it's so much easier to integrate. But commercial airlines, they're using, our FMS system where we use the weight and balance and all that stuff, that's a system that they made in the 80s and 90s. I mean, we use old stuff just because for them to be able to just change their interface for the employees, the pilots to check their schedule and stuff, that's all stuff that would cost them millions to swap and change out, and then there's training for everybody.
Maybe, and I wanted to ask you guys a question. Let me switch it up. Maybe it's just me because I'm so unaware of what actually goes into that technology. Why are those Garmin things so expensive? Why isn't there someone that mass produces all of them and undercuts these $40,000 to $80,000 devices? Like the FMS, all of it. I just never understand. I have never understood how one company can monopolize that entire industry.
Can be so good at one thing. That's what they do. Because we have planes that have other systems. There's Aviation. There's some other systems that are out there.
Yeah, they're cheaper that help, but they're nothing compared to. There really isn't many companies, and you're right. They do have a monopoly, and it's kind of the way Boeing and Airbus have a monopoly over most airlines. It's like it's basically just two companies, and because they're so well established now that people have trust issues with other companies. But there are other companies that do have smaller avionics systems that you can get that help out. You're
telling me no one can make something close or even better for cheaper?
I do think that they must be very expensive because they do have gyroscopic lasers and things like that to help with the AR system, and I know that it is complex systems. But I don't know overall the cost.
No way, it's $40,000 to $80,000.
It's gotta be cheaper.
So do we need to start something here? Am I here? We need to shut this podcast down and figure out how we're going to create something new. Think about this, though, when you think about the market, and I worked in marketing my whole life. I'm a radio and television guy, meteorologist by trade. So when we get something that is so invasive in the market, we don't call them tissues, we call them Kleenex. That's a brand name. We don't call it a GPS, we call it a Garmin. Garmin is now above the fray. They own that space in the market. So if you are another company and you want to come in, when we're about to start, what I think will happen is we're going to have to pierce, and that's a lot of metal, but we got this, bros.
You do think it would, though, because it is so expensive. If you could undercut their prices, people would be willing quickly to jump on your
when I started looking into some of the avionics of what it would cost to upgrade our Citation, I was like, it's going to cost more than the plane.
Especially avionics in a jet. That gets crazy.
And I was like, there is no way. I was trying to understand, is it because they produce so little of them that there's not enough of like a buyer pool, that no one wants to compete in this because there's no reason to innovate this industry? But then I was like, no, $40,000 to $80,000 is still $40,000 to $80,000, right?
Another thing too with all the costs is that you have to get FAA certification to pass all of the strict things, because they have to know that the instruments that you're going to be getting from this is trustworthy enough to be able to fly 1,000 feet from another plane carrying 300.
I guess at that point, maybe we don't want to talk too much about it, because then if the FAA
Yeah, they'll be like, well, we like Garmin.
Yeah.
But yeah, they do. It does cost a lot of certification. So a lot of companies, I think, are just stuck there because of funding issues. But like Starlink, for example, they just got certified finally on one jet, the Gulfstream.
Okay.
And then they just got the Bombardier 7500 that got certified.
That's huge.
But it costs millions just to get one jet model certified for the Starlink.
That's ridiculous.
And that's just because you're trying to get it mounted onto the plane, and that has to go through rigorous FAA certification, and then it costs millions of stuff. So,
which I think is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Again, maybe it's my lack of understanding, but yeah.
The FAA it's tough because they are old fashioned, but they also need to make sure that they're so scared of any changes because then if there's a rise in accidents, they're suddenly so liable. Yeah.
Okay, so if we're not going to do this thing where we attack Garmin and make all the money, have you ever thought about flipping this into a 135 type business, like a charter 135 type business, and getting into a little deeper in the plane business? Because I got a pilot buddy, and I know a flight school that can help you venture with. So have you ever thought about that? Is that something that trips your trigger at all?
As in, like, having a jet servicing business?
Let's get busy.
Yeah, like renting it out and people paying to fly.
For a little bit. So that's what they're doing right now with the Citation. And I just felt like with when I began to learn more about the insurance and what the parts cost, I just felt like it was going to become like the overhead on my, net actual return. It was not really going to be worth it. Where if I'm going to be proactively using the plane and I'm just trying to offset expense or cost, then sure, I can probably subsidize that by having a jet rental service or company. But I feel like at that point, I would have to be fully committed, and it would be another thing that I would then have to promote, and then it takes me away from what I currently have going on. And at least in my experience, I always need someone that's fully committed and fully obsessed about whatever business it is that we are working on for it to do well. Anytime that I don't have that individual focused on that, like with Nick, when it comes down to the house flips, me with the trading, or my partners that I had for like the car dealership, everyone had to always be one individual that was fully committed. If not, it just wouldn't work. And I just knew I wasn't going to be the
yeah, I say the same thing. You can't expect what you don't inspect. And when you've got multiple things going out, and you can't cover all the fingers. And I say that all the time. Someone has to be in charge of that has skin in the game and has something to lose if it doesn't work. Because if not, that's going to slip because we can't inspect it like we should.
There's too much competition in business. And if you start falling behind in just even a small way, then at that point, what's the point of doing it?
It's exactly like what we talked about planes. In the checklist and the things that pilots go through, every single detail matters.
Yep.
And that's what you're telling me. That's what I'm picking up from a lot of this is that knowing the market, that 2 years that you talked about that I need to kind of learn, I'm learning the details because the details matter. When the CEO switches from one company to another, I need to know how that's going to play out.
Yeah.
And I thought when I look at the things on Instagram, which is at
Ricky Gutierrez.
With 2 Z's?
Yeah.
Okay. So if I'm looking for you there, one of the things that I thought was interesting, and during this year we could especially talk about this. You were talking about what was going on in the marketplace, and you brought up the fact that our politicians are leading the way on the profit, and nobody's screaming, why are they having 70% returns when I'm lucky to get a few percent? Mm-hmm. No one looks at them. Yeah. And I thought that was very interesting here in an election year. I'm interested to see if that ever changes. I mean, they get rich and I get broker. I mean, I don't think that works. How is your hand always in my pocket, and how come you got two hands and I only got two pockets? That ain't right.
Yeah, I think more now than ever before, people are just being more aware of. I don't want to call it corruption because I do not know if that's what it actually is. I just think that if we want to make sure that the people that we elect in power have no personal gain from the position that they are elected in, then we should make sure that there's no personal benefit nor their families that they could gain from that position other than doing their actual job, where it's become such an issue of not just outperforming the S&P 500. I think there was like over 35 politicians last year that outperformed the S&P 500, and that was after a record year for 2023. But more along the lines of, how are these politicians continuously getting so much wealthier, but yet whatever state it is that they are representing is getting so much worse? Where it's now like a very clear issue. I don't think that America has ever been so divided, not just by if you're a Democrat or Republican or whatever it is that you want to call yourself, but no one trusts anyone anymore. And right. I think a lot of it has to do with the people that are elected in power and the lack of actual accountability that they're actually held to, where now there's a bill supposedly being presented, and I don't believe that it will get passed, but it will be to restrict every politician from being able to trade, because as of right now they have to report within 45 days of when they take a trade, which is fine, but at that point it still just doesn't make sense. If professional athletes are not able to bet on their own games, then how are our politicians allowed to bet in companies that they regulate? Warren Buffett has a quote saying that I can fix our debt issue. You know, you get every politician and you give them 3 years. If the GDP or our debt increases by 3% of what our GDP is, no one is available for re-election. Like if we were to have that black and white of an expectation from the people that we elect in power, it won't even be a conversation. Like it shouldn't be a conversation. It's their sole focus should be to represent the people that elected them. That is all.
That's it.
And like there's no ands or ifs, or there's still people, and well then they're not people that should be in that position. If your sole focus is not to represent the people that elected you, then you should not be in that position. I truly do believe that more now than ever before. I think there needs to be a rebalance of even with like our presidents. I'm not a fan of any of them.
Sure.
Where now everyone that like it's almost become a joke. I can't speak for the rest of America, but at least the people we have within our close friend groups, where you're just trying to choose the person that is the least bad, and that's just an unfortunate position to be in.
The lesser of the evils is the game you're playing.
Yeah.
And let's face it, things have not been right in this country since Martha Stewart went to jail. Everybody knows that. Good thing is Snoop was able to rebound and save her career, and I appreciate all he put into that, man. For shizzle.
I like that.
So I was looking at some of the videos. Do you think the housing market is still a place that you could play? Now, are we in a bubble kind of, and I say this, maybe not a financial bubble, but because we live in Gilbert, Mesa, Phoenix, this area is a highly desirable area.
Expanding markets.
Yeah, so obviously that's a good place to play. Maybe the house flipping business is not as strong in Poughkeepsie or Schenectady as it will be in an area this big, and maybe is that how you kind of determine that, where you live?
So I like to I could only share an opinion based off of the conditions that I've experienced, and what I've known now is, like, especially from 2022 to when interest rates started going up, and we started seeing demand slowly fall. I think Arizona is a great market to be invested in, but when it comes down to like expanding cities, as in like Globe or something that's really far out, like Santan Valley, we really saw those areas get more affected rather than Gilbert, Mesa, and Phoenix or Chandler, because people are still moving here, right? But when it came down to, you would often hear, oh, let's invest in Santan Valley when markets were picking up, because those are expanding markets and we want to invest into those, get in early on, and potentially make a lot more than what we could make off of these more popular cities. But then what we notice is during these downturns, those areas get affected the most. Now there's less demand overall, but definitely less demand in those areas. And I would say, as of right now, still fair demand in Gilbert is my favorite one, but then Mesa, Phoenix, and Chandler are still very popular ones. What we are currently now in the possible like edge of is the Federal Reserve is expected to start cutting interest rates as soon as next month. And if that's the case, it's going to be interesting to see that if the Federal Reserve begins to cut interest rates, that makes it less expensive for people like you and I and businesses to borrow money. So if that's the case, then naturally markets tend to expand, because naturally when money becomes less expensive, people begin to spend more money. Therefore, when people begin to spend more money, economies continue to grow. So we'll see if they begin to cut interest rates. If at that point, it would be wild because real estate's already crazy expensive. But if at that point, then real estate prices go up even higher, because then demand should naturally begin to pick up. But who knows, with this presidential election, and if something else gets thrown into the mix, it wouldn't surprise me if it doesn't. Technically speaking, yes, when interest rates drop, we should see prices begin to go up because demand begins to go up, therefore instilling more competition in the marketplace.
And you can copy that, if you will, because Phoenix is not isolated in that growth explosion. You have your Austin, Texas, your Nashville, Tennessee.
Definitely.
Those places are exploding. So you can replicate that process. And like he was talking about, maybe you can generate your own personal wealth growing in those markets that are exploding like that.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different ways. I mean, one thing that's become very popular even recently is, I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it's like Section 8 housing.
Yes, my buddy came to me and he's like, bro, we can make, and he's been doing it for like 15 years.
Wow.
And it's paid a lot of money too.
Yeah.
And in Podunk, South Carolina, where I'm from, a lot of money is like it don't exist.
Yeah.
So to get it on that Section 8, that's interesting. Explain more about that. I wasn't trying to hijack.
No, it's something that I began to learn more of. A popular influencer now, he reached out to me about, I want to say like 3 years ago, and it was when he was first getting started. Now I think he's one of the most popular influencers for Section 8. And it was one of the first times I ever heard of not Section 8, but of someone capitalizing on it to that degree. And now he has over 700 rental properties through Section 8. He collects over $1 million a month. And now I see close friends of mine that also have done very well for themselves, but now are investing heavy. They're getting away from Airbnbs, as that's become more of a saturated market and more challenging to cash flow based off of new regulations that are being put into place. And now going into Section 8. And I love when we begin to see these shifts, because 5 years ago I never heard of Section 8, but now we're beginning to see this shift where even you having this conversation recently with one of your friends, it's like it's showing like as market conditions change or become less favorable in other areas, then new niches or a way to arbitrage the market begins to come about. And I love moments like that, because it's just another way to capitalize.
Yeah, you gotta adapt.
He loved that his money was kind of almost protected in some ways in that Section 8 game.
That's what they say. For those that are unaware of what Section 8 necessarily is pretty much housing that's subsidized by the government. So therefore, the way that they present it now is you could buy a property with like almost seller finance or put very little down, $2,000 to $5,000 down. You can buy a number of these, get it approved for Section 8 by the government. So it's this little process. Once it gets approved, they get someone to offer their subsidized at a specific like rent, which almost makes more sense cash flow wise, because that one property might only cost you $500 or $600 a month. It might cash flow you like $1,200, but then with how little capital they require, you could buy like 5 or 10 of those properties instead of buying 1 or 2 of Airbnbs, right? And then dealing with those tenants. And the way that they explain it, just how you said, is guaranteed by the government, that it doesn't matter if it's a downturn or whatever it is, it's subsidized by the government. Therefore, you always receive a check at the first of every month. And I mean, I've heard nothing but good things about it, especially more now than before.
There's no one on this planet that I trust more than our government.
You got the government on your side. You're set.
Long as I got the government, I'm good.
Yeah. Ricky, thanks for being here this morning. Man. For real, we really appreciate it. It was awesome to hear.
Thank you for having me, and thanks again for the flight. I'm excited to do it again.
Yeah, man. We'll get you that license.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining Aviator Edge podcast, where we give you the edge in life and in the sky.